Matthew here, Liquid Porcelain Technology, coming at you with another video. We're going to go about spray pattern and some spray gun techniques. First thing we're going to talk about is spray gun settings. That's the back of your spray gun. This is where you're going to hold it. And then you're going to have a dial here. And this dial is going to control your fluid. Now, you can do this a couple of different ways. You can take the gun. There's your trigger. This is your fluid valve here. You can take the trigger and you can pull it all the way back. You loosen this all the way back, you pull this all the way back, and then you screw this in until it hits your trigger that's pulled all the way back. That's full open. And then you count how many turns you screw that in. You can do it that way. That's one way you can do it. And you take your fluid valve and you screw it all the way in. There's your trigger. You screw it all the way in till you can't pull your trigger. So when you pull your trigger, there's nothing that comes out the front. Then you screw it back, how many turns? And I'll tell you how I spray. Most of the time, it works out to 1.5 turns out. You could have it so that you pull it all the way, and then you thread it back in, and maybe it's 2 turns in. It doesn't matter, whichever way you feel more comfortable with. The key here is consistency. You do this on every job. You never trigger it. You never leave this wide open and play with your finger. The old guys in the shop that I was under, they would trigger everything. I don't know how the heck they did it. I couldn't do it. I couldn't paint that way. I had dry spray. It's because it wasn't consistent. And the way you control the fluid coming out of the front of your gun, this is number one. Control how much fluid is coming out of the tip of the gun by being consistent on the back of your gun. Let's talk a little bit about your spray pattern. This will be on the fan of the gun. Some guns, this part here, this little coupler here, you thread it out, your fan goes like this. You thread it in, it pulls the air cap in, and then your fan goes like this. Some guns have it here, okay? You screw this in, it goes a really tight pattern like this. You unscrew it out, it goes to a very wide pattern like this. And on some of them, this is your fan here. It doesn't really matter where, as long as you have control of your fan pattern. We go from a pattern like this to a very wide pattern like this. What we want is consistency here, from here to here. We want to have basically about the same amount, very even in this area. Now, if you're spraying a pattern and it looks like this, it's really heavy here, and it's very light here, you've got to dial your patterns. You make it more narrow. So instead of being wide like this, start to pull it in until you have a nice oblong pattern where from here to here, you've got about 7 to 8 inches, and it's very even. But you're going to watch with your eye from here to here. In this area, this is where you're going to keep track of your overlap pattern in this area. So this is the back of the gun. If you've got your knob is here, most of them will have little markings on them. That does not have any markings on there. What I do is I make a marking. So how do I do it? It's made of aluminum. You take a razor blade and you go from the middle and you go up and down here many times until you got a big line there that you can see. So what I do is I screw mine in all the way and I make a line right on the back of my gun right there. And so every time I know exactly where it's in all the way, and then I count 1 to 1.5. Then I put it there. I know that's 1.5 turns out. So I'm going to talk about how I like to spray. Okay. I got 1.5 turns out. Okay. If I'm doing a smaller job, just a bathtub, just the hood of a car, just the hood and the fender, and I'm going to go 1.5 turns out, what you don't want to do is go, oh, not enough product is coming out. I need to slow down. No, don't do that. If enough isn't coming out, you want to test and maybe go 1 3/4 out and see how that is. So you started off here, you went around once, and now you're here, and that's not enough. So maybe then you bring it to here. But you know it's consistent every time when you pull that trigger. It's going to be consistent. Sometimes I'll go here and it's too much. I'm putting too much on. So then I'll go back, I'll go in between. Oh, just perfect. That's exactly what I want to see. Beautiful. It's consistent every time. You got 3 feet from here to here. How fast are you going to move your gun within that 3 feet? And you're going to do 1.5 seconds to 2.5 seconds for 3 feet. And that looks like this. Whatever you do, move the same way every time. You're going to get that speed the same time. You want to be consistent in how you're moving your hand. It's like you're a robot. As soon as you put that gun in your hand, you're like a robot that goes back and forth, the same speed. And the way you put more material on is not slowing. I'm not saying slow to 2.5 if you normally spray this way. No. Whatever way you spray. So let's say you spray at 2.5 every time. And you put your first coat on and you're 1.5 turns out on your fluid. Okay? Right? And you notice you get your third coat on and it's not quite as flowing, as smooth as you want. You might take that and turn that out 1 3/4. Now, if you turn out at 1 3/4 and you say, oh, I'm going to slow down on top of that, and you go down to this 2.5, but you're not used to that, maybe you're going to extend this out to 3.25 seconds for the 3 feet now. Now you're just loading it. You're also doing your overlap pattern, which we're going to talk about in a second, which is nice and tight, which it should be. And I'm going to explain why you have a nice tight overlap pattern and why you're going to get less runs doing that. And it's going to go on smoother. It's going to go on smoother than you've ever had it go on before. And it's not going to run on you. And I'm going to explain why it won't run and it will be smoother. If you got a nice tight pattern like this and you've slowed down to this and now you've got this turned out, you're just flooding the material on, you're not even realizing it, that you've probably increased your material output that's actually hitting into the substrate probably 2 to 2.5 times. And all what you needed was an extra 10%. Let's talk about overlap pattern now. So you've got your spray pattern all worked out, where from here to here to here to here, 25% of how heavy this area is going to be. But your eye is going to catch this, because this is going to be where the tip of your spray pattern is. Your eye is going to catch this. Okay. So in this area, we're going to say that this is 8 inches. And this from here to here might be 1/2 inch on each top and bottom, but we're not going to count that. We're only going to count these 8 inches here of where this spray pattern is completely even. So make sure you set up your gun like that. We got our oblong pattern, but for this illustration, we're going to build our spray pattern like this, but we know it's supposed to be oblong, but I'm going to show you guys like this. This is your spray pattern right here. Let's say it's 8 inches. That's your one pass. Then your next pass, you're going to drop 1 inch. And why are we only going to drop 1 inch? Because from here to here, I want 90%. If you can only do 80%, that's still okay. But you do not want to do 50%. If you do 50%, you have to load so much coating on. Here's your paint droplet that you're putting on, okay? To make this flow out and make this nice and smooth, instead of making orange peel like this, okay? You have to load it. Now, you can get really good at doing it this way if you've done it for a long time this way, and you've struggled with runs, and you struggled, and you finally got the magic formula, the magic speed that seems to work with you. Fair enough. Not broken, don't fix it. But if you're struggling and you want to make it smooth effortlessly, and you don't want to run a risk of having all kinds of problems, you do 90%. If you can do 80 to 90%, it's going to work every time. And I'm going to show you something, is that every time you pass over again, you're recoating here. You pass over again, you recoat this and you recoat this. You pass over again, you recoat this, and recoat this. So by the time you've dropped down and passed over the entire area that you're trying to spray, you've passed over this once, twice, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times. But thin coats, thin. Why does this make less runs, Matt? Why wouldn't you do 50%? You're putting less you have a less chance of it running. And I'm going to tell you why. And this has to do with atomization. That's where you plug your air. Air goes in there. And you're breaking up the resin that's in your gun. If you're unfamiliar with this pattern, go back and watch my other video about how to thin paint. Okay? The paint droplet. This is our spray. This is our spray pattern, and this is our spray pattern. And then we're dropping down. Okay? And we're doing another overlap pattern. This is 1 inch. This is 1 inch. If you're spraying like this, you don't have to load it. Saying, well, between this area here, this part's getting like coated like 5-6 times. However, the particles that are flying through the air that have your solids, your in-flight, and your tail, you almost have zero in-flight. It's all come out. Plus, you're laying it on thinner. You're doing thinner, lighter coats. Droplets are landing on the substrate. And because you've got the proper amount of tail solvent in there, they're oblonging. In the tail solvent, as it sits on there on your first pass, it's oblonging because there's no in-flight solvent. There's enough tail solvent to have it oblong and flow out very nice. Then when you come along with your next pass on your overlap pattern that's 90%, you're putting the next ones on and they're laying down nice and smooth. Then you come along with your next pass and they're laying down nice and smooth. And during this entire process, the coat that you're laying down is skinny. So you do thinner, lighter, many times on top. And what ends up happening is the whole part of the paint droplet. Now all you have is tail. This is off-gassing. And mostly what you're left after your second pass is just tail solvent coming out of it. Because you've done it this way, your particle is mostly solid resin that's sitting in the droplet now. When you have no solvent left in the resin has a thing called memory. So now this has evaporated, okay? It's gone. It's in flight. That part of the solvent is already out of the droplet. This is, let's say, by the time you get to your second pass over top of it, you're down 75% of tail solvent in this. And all you're left is with this. This part of the droplet, okay, so your droplet's shrinking. You got your droplets that have nice and flowed out nice and smooth, okay? Then you get another pass on top of that, and they've went nice and smooth too, okay? This all starts to work with each other. They all start to flow together. And because you have almost no solvent left in this, okay, they all want to lay flat. They all want, whether it's on the bottom or on the side, they don't want to run down. They're sticky. They're kind of thick now. But you allowed it to lay flat before it got sticky. And I do it this way, and it turns out smooth and effortless every time. And you're standing there, you're looking at, well, it's pretty smooth. You go like this, and you're like, well, there's no way that's going to run. It's already got body to it. It's because the resin has memory. And the memory of the resin is to lay flat like water. It wants to lay like this. It doesn't want to orange peel like this. If it orange peels on you like this, you got droplets underneath there. Now, I'm not saying you can't get it to work that way. I'm saying that if what you're doing, you don't have good results, try this. I want an easy day at work. I don't want it complicated. I just want to know it's going to work out every time. You do this, and it works out every time for me. It's going on nice and smooth and wet. You don't have any more runs anymore. You don't have any dry spray blotches. You don't have any orange peel going on. It's nice and smooth. Life is all good. And then you walk into a job where you got to use primer. I prime everything, and people look at it and go, how the heck did you get that so smooth and prime? I apply the exact same principles to my top coat as I do with my primer. You're just spraying on a different type of resin, and it's doing the same thing. This is your metal hood. This is your fender. This is your tub. This is your ceramic tile, whatever you're spraying. And then you prime it, okay? Let's say this is fiberglass. And you put your bond, you sand it, you're an overkill guy like me, you sand it really good, You clean it really good. You blow it, you tack it. It's all etched. You use wet sandpaper too, and it's so clean. You take your finger and you know it's super, super nice and clean. If you put your primer on and you got your primer droplets and you're using too fast of a solvent, and for some reason, everybody loves to use faster solvent because they think faster is more better. More faster, more better. And your droplets are laying like this. So you've got primer that looks like this. Okay, this is a cross cut of it. Okay, so your primer looks like the McDonald's M, and you go, well, it feels kind of rough a little bit, but it's okay. I'm going to put top coat on there. You go put your top coat on this. Do you think your top coat's going to just go on top smooth like that, or do you think your top coat is probably going to mirror what your primer is? It's going to mirror what your primer is. That the primer has to be smooth. Now, if you've got your substrate like this, and you've put your primer on, and the primer looks like this, or the primer looks like this, and you go and put your coating on top of that, okay? This is what's going to happen to the coating. It's going to follow the shape of your primer. Exactly. And because this isn't laying smooth, and all the top coat is being sucked into this, because if it didn't lay smooth, if your primer isn't laying like this, okay, what's going on with this primer here? You got like all this. Here's your primer droplet, okay? It's the same thing as a coating, same thing as your top coat, okay? You got your solid part, okay? You got your in-flight, you got your tail, okay? And you've put it on like this. Instead of it going nice oblong like this because the in-flight and the tail solvent is evaporated, you got your droplet stuck like this. And if you loaded the primer on and you didn't allow it to gas off, the top is flashed. You've got all the solvent trapped in here, okay? And this is blowing out the top of your coating, okay? And you're going, my goodness, what's going on? I've got all these fish eyes and craters, and it's all hazy, and it looks like there's sand all over it. There's no sand, but it looks like there's these little bits of sand. You take your hand and it's hazy and it feels rough. You got your substrate here. You got your primer here. We'll do the Humpty Dumpty prime. Then you put your top coat on here. Okay. Follow the same shape of your prime. And it's really orange peely. And you put it on and it looked kind of smooth, but now it kind of went orange peel and you can't really figure this part out. This is what's happened. That little sand you're feeling, those little specks that you see, is solvent that's trying to escape, which is this part of the droplet, is blowing out through the skimmed over coat of your top coat. And the reason why it did that is because this got dry really fast, and this got dry really fast, and there was still leftover solvent, maybe in your prime. And if you're priming like this, you probably top coated it like this. So then you've got all this solvent left over here that's trying to blow through. So then what you end up with is your top of your coating looks like this. You got this little canal in here that's going down to the substrate, and it's blowing out. You've got all this solvent trying to escape. It will escape. It'll end up popping little microscopic holes in it. We put our primer on like this. Then we put our top coat on like this. And we've got our solvent trying to escape out of all these little holes. They're going all the way down to the base, okay, of your substrate, where your tub is. What's going to happen when you put a bunch of water on this and the water sits in there, right? The water's going to start to go in here. And then what's going to happen, right? Water's going to get underneath the coating. And it's going to start to delam in here. And then one day somebody's going to come and they're going to hit this area here, and you're going to have a big chip that's going to happen here. And then they're not going to call you because they might not notice it for maybe a week or so, right? And then you're going to have this all start to peel back in here. And you're thinking, well, I etched this, I primed it, I put bonding agent, I did all this stuff. How did this happen? There's something wrong with the product. No, guy. It all started with your in-flight and tail solvent. When you match this all up with your overlap pattern and it's laying on nice and smooth, and you don't have pop going on, you don't have cratering going on, you don't have all these weird things going on, and it's nice and smooth, you get a nice seamless coating barrier that is completely bonded to your substrate. These are all locked into each other, and you never have problems. Use proper reduction, proper solvent for your environment. If it's 70 degrees, use the solvent reduction agent that's for 70 degrees. If it's hotter, then slow it down a little bit. If it's cooler, speed it up a little bit. But make sure that it lays down flat, smooth every time, all the way from the ground coats up, including your primer. Primer is just important as your top coat, because if your primer is all messed up, you can't fix it with top coat. We understand this concept. Then it brings us to this part of the equation. Solids. You have to have enough mill build on there. You have to have enough coats. You have to have enough product. You put the skinniest coat on that you can possibly put on. It's super skinny and it's beautiful, but it's super thin. If the bottom of your shoes were made out of rubber that was the thickness of a piece of paper, how long do you think that would last? Or cured mill build. It's when we take this part out of the equation. This has disappeared, okay? This doesn't exist anymore because it has dried and cured, and all we have left is this. Now, I'm going to use some of these numbers for illustrating the concept of idea. You're going to have to look up with whatever coating you're spraying. The manufacturer of the coating is going to give you specific mill build, what you need, and they're going to say what the percentage of solids are in that particular resin, clear coat, paint, whatever you're spraying, elastomer, it doesn't matter. Whatever you're spraying, there's technical data sheets on that, and it's going to describe and instruct how much you should put on and how thick it should be after it's cured. So in this illustration, we're going to say 50% solids, okay? Some might be 70, some might be 53, some might be 22%. You know, like wall paint that you're putting on, that you buy at Sherwin-Williams, that you're putting on inside your house, you know, it might be only like, I don't know, 20% solids, right? The rest is just liquids and solvent that just all evaporate, right? But we're going to say 50% for this. I know there's high build clears out there, you know, they're almost 60%, 63%. That's fine. We're going to say 50%. So if you're mixing up something, mixing cup, and we've got all our things on the side here that tell us how much we're mixing, okay? And let's say it's a 4-to-1 mix ratio, right? And we're going to do 4 parts. This is a reducer, thinning agent, right? So let's just say that the 4-to-1 we'll make it easy, okay? So we're going to do 4 ounces of resin, okay? And then we're going to do 1 ounce of catalyst. And then we're going to do, okay, we're going to do another 4 ounces of reducer. If you want to know how to make your own reducers and what I use, watch the other video. So we put 4 ounces of reducer and 1 ounce of cat. Okay, so this part right here, the cat in the resin, we said was 50% solids. Okay, that means that out of this 5 ounces that we've created, okay, you're going to end up with 2.5 ounces, okay, of pure mill build. You're spraying this on. So you're saying, okay, Matt, let's make this really simple. Okay, so right here, you have 9 ounces. Okay, out of these 9 ounces, after it's dried, you're only going to have 2.5 ounces. Okay, is this starting to make sense here that you need to put more than 1 or 2 coats on? You put 1 coat on, 2 coats on, 3 coats on. I'm done, I'm leaving. It's beautiful. And let's say all this was 9 ounces of resin. This is going to become 2.5 ounces of resin. This is what you got down. 2.5 ounces of protection. You don't have 9, you have 2.5 ounces of protection, right? So if you want to have longevity, you have to read up on each manufacturer of each coating that you're using and see what they recommend is the mill build you need to have longevity. For me, I have found that if I spray with 90% overlap and I put on 4 to 5 coats of top coat. And I do 3 coats of primer sealer or primer surfacer. We're going to call this primer sealer because we're basically doing a wet on wet application. And I know if I put 1 coat or I wipe on 1 coat, coupling agent or bonding agent, and I give it a quick little etch before, I know that if I do this, okay, because I've done this for a long time, and I come back and I see the job 10 years from now, I know it still looks good. So if you want to use this formula that I use, you go ahead, because that ensures to me that I know when I do this, that job is going to look good for 10 years plus no matter what. Because I've got enough mill build. I've got primer on there. It's going to help with adhesion. And the primer coat's going to help a little bit with impact. And how does that work? If you took your hand and you put it on a piece of concrete, and then I took a pair of ladies' high heel shoes and I banged on my hand and my hand was on the concrete, it's going to hurt. It's going to really hurt my hand. But if I took my hand and put it on a pillow and I did the same, it's not going to cause any near the damage. So it does help a little bit with impact. To what extent? A little bit. But in this game, every little bit helps. Then I got my coupling agent on, then I give it a little bit of etch where I know it's going to have a lot of wear and tear, maybe not everywhere, maybe not on the wall that's behind the toilet. I'm probably not going to etch that, but I'm going to clean that very good. And I'm going to rely on my coupling agent or bonding agent to bond it to it really good. But like on the inner part of the tub where I know it's really worn anyways and it's etched a little bit, I want to clean it up a little bit more, I'm probably going to etch that area. So when I do all of this, I know it's going to last a long time, and I've got confidence in that because I've tested it and I've seen it. Try this formula, see if it helps. If you guys have any questions, put it in your comments below. Give me a thumbs up. It helps Google algorithm, and I'll keep making more of these videos if people want me to. And if not, then I'll just keep doing my own thing. It's all good. Lay shiny paint. We'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.